Alright, time for another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here in Mendham. Yeah. Which, they just don't want to leave it alone, in Mendham says. Instead, I have to be doxxed everywhere. It's just pretty annoying. That people decide for me, okay, what I am going to be called. And it's, just annoying that that's the way the world works now. You don't get to control your identity. They get to. The theys. But anyway, so I just did a search on Google for the hell of it. What is ephilism? And although the description isn't terrible, it just needs work. Because yes, it's all these little subtleties, and this is why I've always hated writing. Is this the fact that you have to really pick the right words and the right way to say those words, and I just hate doing that part. And now AI can do it for you, but it does it this way, and it's not right either, frankly. From my perspective, and not good enough, says me. So you're always fighting for the perfect way of stating it. It's exact and precise, some sort of scientificness to it, instead of some kind of ambiguous and sloppy kind of statement. But anyway, but most of it's okay. And then if you go to the extended AI, it gives you this much more opinionated it doesn't just say what it is. It says, it's a fringe philosophy. It's decidedly negative, blah, blah, all this kind of negative rhetoric that are just indicating that the opposers have probably a louder voice than the supporters, which is understandable because we live in a world full of idiots, right? I mean, the most popular philosophy in the world is Mohammedan mushy nonsense, that Muslim Islam crap, and the second and third and fourth are all some version of some kind of horrid pile of shit like that. And then you get to the scientist and it's all wooey, we all want to go to space and live on Mars bullshit. So it's all pretty bad. So, I mean, to say you're fringe when you're on planet Earth is sort of a badge of honor, but obviously it's not a practically good badge. Being right just won't get you anywhere on this planet, and that's the sad tragedy. That's the thing that has to change. Like the magnetic field flipping, the world needs to flip in terms of humans into recognizing that the truth is the admirable position to have, and bullshit is the embarrassingly stupid thing to believe. So anyway, so I just thought I would read a little bit of this, and just say, oh yeah, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Alright, so ephilism is a philosophy. Okay, that's probably okay, right? It's probably not the most brilliant way to say it, but yes, it's a philosophy. The philosophy doesn't believe, so that's no good, right? Philosophies don't believe things. So that states, is what it should state here, or proposes, okay? So it's a philosophy that proposes that life is inherently negative. That's really not the argument. It's not inherently, it's not by its very design in negative. It's by its function, okay, on net balance, unproductive. So that would be the better argument, is some kind of better way to say that the net product is not victory. Okay, that it's less win than there is lose. There's more lose than there is win. There's more negative in bulk it's punctuated by events of such a negative character that any of the positive value gleaned out of the more peaceful moments is destroyed by the punctuations of catastrophic bad. Watching somebody you love slowly and horribly die. Yeah, it's not good. It's bad enough to say, oh, I don't want to do this again. All right. So we fixed that a little bit. let's see, Efilism is a philosophy, yes, okay, that proposes that life is, on balance, a negative adventure, okay, and marked by suffering. We already said that sort of, but yes, punctuated by catastrophic suffering, arguing that the most ethical path is the so you don't even have to say extinction, you say the graceful decline of the populations of sentient life. So we don't have to make them extinct, we just have to make them breed less and expire gracefully. So anyway, it extends antinatalism. Well, frankly, antinatalism doesn't really say much. I can't see that it's a real complete philosophy either, so it's not really something to reference as a core, because frankly it doesn't have a core value. People are antinatalist for 15 million different reasons, so it's sort of negated as being a philosophy. It's more like a behavior, and so it can't really be the origin or the foundation for this more sensible statement that the problem is in the sentient brain. So that's, if you're going to say there's a feature that is necessary to this problem existing, the feature is sentience, the capacity to feel. And the fact is, life is going to impose feelings, circumstances where you're not likely to feel good, and it's going to feel very bad. All right. Opposed to procreation to all life, so they're just saying it extends antinatalism to all life, and it doesn't extend it to all life, so it extends it to all sentient life. So all life doesn't mean anything, right? Parameciums are alive. Epilists are not concerned with the state of a paramecium. Single-celled organisms are not going to evolve into brain-enabled organisms. Anyway, and brain-enabled isn't the only feature. You need a brain-enabled that actually has the sentient component, which is the most abstract and complex in terms of being able to identify how it's produced, part of our brain. I mean, we can figure out that our brain is storing experiences because we can poke it and make the experiences be relived, but we can't understand how we relive them, what the part is that's making us re-feel the experience. Okay, including animals. Well, again, animals that have brains, and advocates for the eradication. Well, again, it advocates for the graceful extinction, so that might be a better term, graceful extinction, of all life as a moral imperative. Well, it'd be an ethical imperative, it's not a moral imperative, and that the beneficial outcome would be the eradication of this negative event of horror and torment and torture, and that there's nothing we lose to have that our delusion that we're having an adventure, that we're writing some important Goldilocks story or Red Riding Hood story, and that it's very, very important, is just an illusion. Okay, it's just a delusion, and we're really not doing anything but being addicted, okay, to some notion of incompleteness. And we're like a heroin addict. We might win for a moment, but we'll lose the game. It just doesn't work in the long term. Your punctuated happiness theory doesn't work, because your happiness will never be worth your sadness. The name Efilism is life spelled backwards. Yes, somebody did that. Suggesting life is life backward. I don't know if that even makes sense, and fundamentally flawed. So it's really just suggesting that the concept of life as a positive is a misunderstanding, and so you spell it backwards just to point out that perception of Mother Nature, or that this is some sort of positive thing, this life thing, is what you've got to dispel and argue against. So, but anyway, like I said, generally speaking, this isn't terrible because it's not using words like fringe and fanatic and, all the other derogatory, negative ways of describing the fact that it's a minority, opinion. So, core belief. So beliefs have core beliefs, Ephilism views existence as a source of suffering. So again, it's kind of a silly thing to say existence. It's only existence in a conscious, sentient condition. And of course, you can't suffer unless you have that sentient condition. So, and believes that the net product, isn't sufficient to justify perpetuating the existence, redoing the experiment. The experiment is not successful enough, often enough, to be worthy of a redo. So that would be one way of explaining that the experiment essentially fails more often than it succeeds to create a life experience that isn't punctuated with way too much pain and suffering. And because of that gigantic amount of pain and suffering you get punctuated with, it's just too high a price to pay. So it's therefore not a valid experiment. It can't pass, some sort of environmental impact statement. The impact is more negative than positive, and therefore not worthy of producing this thing, because it has a high probability of creating dismal failure. Your Frankenstein monster will too often throw little kids in the in the pond, and murder blind people, and it will too infrequently will it cure cancer. And believes that the elimination of all sentient life would be a compassionate act. Well, that's a good thing to say, compassionate. It would be a sensible, reasonable, very good outcome for the conditions on planet Earth, is to have all these animals stop eating each other and all of this pointless death to be discontinued. The life part is it's really just a struggle to die over and over again rather than a struggle to live over and over again. And it's got to be understood that that's what you're really giving somebody, is death. You can pretend you're just giving them life, but you're giving them death, and you're giving them all of the brutalities that they'll have to endure in getting to their death. And before they die, they're going to have to watch other things die. And then they're going to have to endure their own destruction. And that's a lot to ask from something when you haven't done it yet. You got no real business selling this lemon when you haven't blown up in it yet. Wait until after you've been destroyed by this monster, and then tell me it's worth it. Alright, unlike traditional antinatalism, so like this traditional antinatalism is a thing, the fact is that people like Schopenhauer weren't just antinatalists, they were too ethilists, but they just didn't form it in those words very well. They weren't explicit enough, but that was all they were after, is they understood that cats and dogs were feeling things. Alright, analyze, which focuses on humans. Ephilism extends its concern to all beings capable of feeling. Yes, of course, it's not bigoted. yeah. So yes, it's smart enough not to be insanely bigoted against dumb animals. Dumb animals that definitely feel in a very rich and complete way. So yes, why would I be bigoted against other organisms just because they're not as smart as me. I don't have any right to assume they don't feel as completely as I do. It's just a lie, frankly, to pretend that feeling is a human thing and that animals don't do it. You could argue that abstract thinking is a human thing and animals don't do that. But feelings, they do. Feelings is a very old function. Doing mathematics is a very modern function. Right. So maybe that's enough of a beginning. Then they're going into this pro-mortalism crap, and that's not really why I brought up the red button. So the red button thought experiment was just being brought up to get to this, social contract problem and the recognition that there's no other way to see it. You can't lose the opportunity because the benefit you can get out of pressing the button is so gigantic that there's no you can't rationally defend failure when the button's right in front of you. You just can't defend it. It's like if you can end World War II by hitting a button, and you're in the middle of the war, you hit the button, It almost doesn't matter what the price is, you hit it. But anyway, alright, so we'll call that a beginning and such. Alright, I'm back. So, pro-mortalism. Now, this is just something, I never even heard this term. It's just terrible. I don't know how this got associated. So, I don't know where the connection comes from. Obviously, it doesn't come from the source of ephilism. I mean, the source. Yeah, it didn't come from me. This term. This isn't what I would describe as any function or part of the philosophy that would have anything nice to say about mortalism in the first place. Dying sucks, frankly. The question is there any other way to solve the problem than, creating death if you're going to have birth? So if they get rid of birth, then maybe I'll be an anti-mortalist, okay, in the sense that, just allow people to make their choice about whether they want to live more or they're had enough of it. So anyway, I mean, obviously to me, there's a point where you've had enough in the sense that you really can't evade your sad memories. There's just too many of them, and they're too devastating to stomach. And frankly, you could hide from the truth, but that's all you can do. You just live a dishonest life, not an honest one. But anyway, all right. Some evilists may advocate. So what does this come from? Where this some word is used, right? So I don't know what percentage of evilists we're talking about. 2%, 1%. I mean, I don't know any of these people except for these fringe people and they're not really pro-mortalists. They're just, I must force the issue now. Okay, I'm not going to negotiate. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to try to make my own red button that doesn't even work. Okay, so I'm not going to cause a graceful exit. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. I'm just going to, blow something up. I mean, obviously that doesn't have anything to do with the subject. It doesn't have anything to do with the cause. All right, anyway, the idea that the goal should be the end of life. Of course, that's the goal. The goal is extinction. The goal is the discontinuation of birthing sentient organisms to, basically just wallow in a pit of quicksand and wait for the moment when they're pushed all the way in. And that's about all life is. It's a struggle. Even very successful people have to struggle. They have to fight for what they desire. They want another gold medal. They want to win the second or fourth or fifth green jacket or some other kind of crap. They have to struggle and fight for it. They need the fix, okay, of success. We're seldom satisfied. So if I give you everything you want, the next day you're going to wake up and you're going to want something more. You're going to say there aren't enough trees in the yard. Or you're going to say there's too many water spots on my Maserati. You're going to find something to bitch about and complain about because that's the nature of the silly organism. But anyway. Alright, so obviously we're, by this definition of pro-mortalism, yes, we're for the graceful discontinuation of the infestation of living sentient beings on the surface of the earth or anywhere else inside the earth. Yes. So, but that's not pro-mortalism. I mean, that's a silly term. And a red button thought experiment is often used to illustrate this. So again, the only thing it illustrates is, well, if you could do this without causing any pain or suffering to any being, in any practical sense, that is, they discontinue their existence without having time to cognitively recognize their demise or to have any sensation of its event, you can't really argue there's a bad thing going to happen. You can't argue that something horrible took place. And that's the dilemma. All right. If a button could painlessly and instantly end all sentient life, would you push it? Yes, is the simple question. It's an awful lot at stake, so you got to think you're going to rescue every single person that's going to die of some horrible tumor, pushing their eyes out of their head. All of that will go away. It won't happen. And what will you be preventing? Square dancing. There'll be nobody with, whatever, silly boots on, doing some silly dance and getting all sweaty for no good reason. Oh, what a horrible loss. So I'm just saying, yeah, it's a one hell of a responsibility to have all the pain and suffering that will be endured by sentient beings being consumed or eaten, torn to pieces, killed in all kinds of horrific ways. All of that goes away, okay, with your power. And it's just one hell of a thing to sit there and say, oh yeah, I'm going to let it all happen because somebody might say, oh, but I want to live, and square dance. And so because somebody says, I want to live and square dance, you're going to sit there and torture quadrillions of sentient organisms. I mean, it's a hell of a thing. I'm just saying, it's a hell of a thing to think about. That's what it should be called, is a paradoxical dilemma question. It's like the trolley problem or something else. It doesn't have a good answer. There's no good answer to the question. All right, anyway. There's no free answer. You got to pick a side. All right, relationship to antinatalism. So again, the only relationship it has to antinatalism is the rejection of antinatalism. That's the whole reason why I decided to become something else besides an antinatalist, is because I was completely dissatisfied with the divergence in philosophical perspective that was calling itself an antinatalist, and that was full of nihilists and full of animal haters and all kinds of jackasses. So why the hell would I be part of that group? So I said, I know, I'm going to be something else. I mean, it's there's a difference between being an anti-Nazi, that is a Russian and an American, and then saying, well, yeah, let's call ourselves anti-Nazis. When you would argue that, no, I'm arguing for, capitalist democracies, and they're arguing for socialist democracy, sort of democracy. So those are two different things. So fuck that. We're not doing the same. We don't want the same outcome. So let's not call ourselves the same thing. So anyway, atheism can be seen as a more extreme, so that's silly, or broader. Yeah, well, that's the sensible word. More inclusive, you could just argue. A more inclusive form of antinatalism that doesn't contain some ignorant bigotry against ignorant animals. So it doesn't understand ignorant animals to be unfeeling machines that are not worthy of rescue. It's saying that if I'm on the Titanic and I'm there with my cat, I'm going to save my fucking cat, or I'm not saving myself. It's that simple. You either recognize these organisms are just as capable of being harmed and tortured as you are, and you're not going to let that happen. Anyway, while antinatalism argues against human procreation, ethylism takes the view further by advocating for the extinction of all life, the graceful discontinuation of the infestation. Yeah, and again, it's not all life, it's life with a sentient brain. All right, basis. It is the basis of the idea that suffering is not the only thing that truly matters, and that any pleasure is only valuable because it is the absence of pain. So that's sort of true. But, it's not really, I wouldn't argue that that's the real basis of it, is that somehow, the simple truth is that you could argue that bliss would be the default state, and the only way you ruin the bliss is to have some sort of aggravation or invading negative to ruin the bliss. So the bliss is the default, and the negative is the blight that you can't escape. And it destroys the value of the bliss. It poisons. It's a poison apple. So one bad apple ruins the whole pie is the simple principle that this catastrophic amounts of harm destroy the value, because the pie only has so much value as a food, and if the risk is it's going to poison you and harm you in some brutal and catastrophic way, then it's really not worth having the frickin' pie. If you have to watch your most respected and appreciated human beings that you've ever met horribly destroyed, it's not worth any glory I could contrive out of my existence. Any triumph is meaningless. If you have to live with the memory of what was lost. There's no victory that undoes what you paid for it. You don't walk away from the war happy, if you watched your brother die in it. Just don't. It ain't gonna happen. So that's what AI said in this version. And then when you ask for the deeper dive, then it gets kind of rude. So I'll do the deeper dive. So it's ephilism, which is life spelled backwards, is a fringe anti-natalist ideology. So again, it's not an anti-natalist ideology. It is an anti-existence ideology. An anti-conscious awareness ideology. It doesn't think consciousness is a winning condition for matter to be in. It's a blight in the universe, not an asset. It causes more negative experience than any positive experience produced by it. That posits that all sentient life is fundamentally characterized by unavoidable suffering. Well, a lot of it's avoidable, but the fact is that it's too high a risk, of catastrophic failure. And the catastrophic failure is a poison apple, and it just ruins the pie. If you have to harm one of your friends to make 3 of your friends happy, you're not winning. You can't all go to Disneyland and drag somebody else behind the car across the asphalt. If you're going to give somebody a really bad time, your silly little adventures will never be worth causing that harm. And thus it is a moral, so again they're using the word morally wrong to procreate. Again, I don't know why these statements can't just use ethical as a word. It's a perfectly valid word. It doesn't have the taint of dogmatic edicts from a god. It's not a moral statement, it's an ethical statement. The ultimate goal of ephilism is the peaceful. Voluntary is nonsense, right? This the animals aren't going to voluntarily go extinct, so we're going to have to engineer their extinction. And the real question is it really a harm for them to be gracefully exited? Is preventing them from completing their adventure some great tragedy? And the simple argument is well, they didn't know that's what happened. It certainly can't be a harm. So if you can make them gracefully and peacefully become non-existent, that are unconscious, you give them a nice laughing gas or something else, put them to sleep, and they never wake up, you haven't done them any harm. but you wouldn't call that voluntary. So again, the word voluntary is kind of a useless terminology, especially in the context of there's lots of people who there's lots of retarded humans and people do things to them. Okay, the retard doesn't volunteer for the put a helmet on his head so he don't smash his brains out or do this or do that. So they don't voluntarily participate, and we do the correct and ethical thing and protect them from harming themselves. Same argument is here. You're going to protect the organism, just like euthanizing a pet when it's dying. It's just a sensible thing to do. Of all sentient life on Earth to end this suffering. This suffering. I don't know what that even... This suffering is a pretty poor sentence. The would be the word. The wasted suffering. Okay, the suffering that can't produce... that we can't produce a positive to compensate for. And that's the simple truth. It's not just that suffering is very bad. It's that our productive accomplishment is very small. Our little silly ego stories, our gratification, our addiction is an ugly thing, not a pretty thing. The fact that we all live seeking perfect wax job on our Maserati, seeking some silly thing, some bullshit, getting a little gold trinket, some little shiny thing, glitter, fluff, bullshit, having more hair follicles, some kind of crap that we think's important, and it's all crap. Core beliefs again. Apholism draws on philosophical pessimism, so it's risk aversion. So that's how I would change that right there. Apholism draws on philosophical risk aversion, a recognition that you can't pay too much for anything, and the fact is we're paying too much for too little. That's the simple argument. It's way too much pain, way too little gain. And negative utilitarianism. So that's a good enough terminology. It's well enough understood, I suppose. Which prioritizes the minimization of suffering over the maximization of pleasure. Obviously, for the obvious reason that the pleasures are very tiny. They take a lot of hunger. You have to do a lot of work to get yourself in a condition where the glory will be worth it. So you have to have a lot of struggle and pain and all that kind of crap to really appreciate when you hold up that gold medal that you earned it, so to speak. It's a fleeting moment. 10 hours later, you'll be saying, oh, yeah, well, I only got one. I gotta get more. Aphilists believe that life inherently contains a disproportionate amount of pain, disease, suffering, including predation in the wild, and outweighs any potential pleasure or meaning. And yes, any purpose, any function, any utility. We do not cure a brokenness in the universe. We don't fix something that's broken, and that's all there is to do in the universe is fix broken things. The universe is not broken. We show up and we make the mess that can't be cleaned up. And that's the simple truth. We spill suffering all over the place and we only clean up a tiny percentage of it. That's the failure. That's where life fails to function. It's insufficiently efficient. Insufficiently efficient. That's how I phrased it, 5 years ago. All right, lack of consent. This is great that throws this argument in because that was missing from the other one. Existence is imposed upon an individual without their consent, and the fact that you can't get their consent doesn't make any difference because you don't have it. It's just a simple truth. You're imposing existence, you're imposing the risk, you're imposing the inevitable failures, the dismal, horrible outcomes. You are, in fact, the murderer. You're causing their death. You're responsible for every bit of it. Okay, you can't just pretend, oh, the only thing I gave them was the fun part. No, you stuck the knife in their brain, the cancer, you injected them with it. That's the absolute truth. From this perspective, bringing a new being into the world is an unethical gamble with that individual's potential for extreme suffering. Exactly. The failure is gross and catastrophic, and you have no insurance policy. There's no way to pay back for what you've imposed, the negative you've imposed. You can't fix it. And the only way you could possibly fix it is to prevent more of it. So you have to go out and find a tragedy bigger than the one you caused to fix the deficit you created by imposing life. All right. So again, with this stupid pro-mortalism nonsense. So now they call it extinctionism. Well, at least that's a better way of saying it, but it's still kind of an ugly term because it's not just about making it extinct. It's about the graceful exit. Unlike some forms of anti-natalism that simply advocate for humans to stop reproducing and let the species die out naturally, obviously this doesn't do any of the other sentient beings on this planet any good whatsoever. It is cruel and evil, okay, to not recognize your obligation to the less educated beings that need your guidance. They need you to do what's in their interest, okay. Many ethicists support the accelerated total cessation of conscious life on the planet. Yes. Accelerated by what, though? So it's not an undefined acceleration. It has to be within the context of some sort of reasonable acceleration. If it could be done instantly and painlessly, often framed as a red button thought experiment. Yes, well, that's the simple argument, is to say not if it could, to say if it was possible, that would be the reasonable alternative. All right, but then again, you have to make your social contract argument. That again, it'd be best for the democracy to vote on the red button. So let's make the red button and then have a democracy vote to hit it. A common thread among adherents is the commitment to veganism, as the philosophy extends its concern to the suffering of all animals. And again, I don't know if it has to be veganism. It just has to be advocating for the cessation of animal experimentation and animal consumption and animal shoemaking and whatever else that causes animals grief. And again, you don't have to be one of them to actually advocate for that end and support policies that promote that end. All right, distinction from antinatalism. Well, that's the good word to have. Yes, there should be a good, clear distinction, because that's why I'm an ethicist, is because I sense the need for a distinction. While ethicist falls under the broader umbrella of antinatalism, well, no, it doesn't, but whatever. It is considered more extreme by many due to its emphasis on total extinction. So again, there's nothing extreme about the idea that animals feel and they're not smart enough to take care of themselves and we need to help them. That is not an extreme view. That's perfectly rational. Okay, philosophical antinatalism, most notably associated with academic David Benatar, typically focuses on the ethics of human procreation. So again, right in the second page of his book, he says clearly everything I'm saying applies to the animal kingdom. So he's just denying his own statement in his own book. This is how they're paraphrasing him, and they ought to just call him out as a duplicitous hypocrite. He obviously wrote something in the book and he can't man up and defend what he wrote because he's too much of a coward to defend the truth that he put in that book. That there is nothing in the logic that makes a distinction between humans with some sort of sense of understanding and dumb, ignorant animals, because the only thing that matters is the sentient portion of their brain, not the mathematical or conceptual part of their brain. The only part that matters is the feeling part. That's the part that is the gist of the entire subject and conversation. This isn't a conversation about whether something's smart enough to act in its own with its own volition. It's just wrong to say, well, the animals can choose to be antinatalists. Well, they can't choose to be. Anyway, but rejects the violent, well, all of us reject violence, or forced extinction of existing life. Well, what does forced mean? And again, is that like saying, oh, well, you're not going to force a retarded person to eat enough? You're not going to force a retarded person to take vitamins? What is this bullshit about, we're not going to force a circumstance on dumb animals? We're going to ask the dumb animals what they want to have happen? I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like asking a 2-year-old, whether it should have a college fund. You know, and it's no point in doing that. So it's just such a pile of crap. So I don't know if I'll even read this because it's got the Palm Spring thing in here. This is just a way of slandering the conversation about the actual philosophy. The fact that jackasses, as you know, I mean, it's happened. Okay, vegans and vegetarians have done rude and obnoxious things. They've thrown paint on people. They've and done worse. They've blown up, animal laboratories. They've broken into them, caused damage, done all kinds of things. So let's not pretend fanatics aren't a problem. Yeah, fanatics in any cause are a problem. So it's not Ephilism's fault that 2 or 3 Ephilists have in the past done something stupid. And again, they weren't really Ephilists in a couple of cases. They were nihilists, not Ephilists. And then the one case, they keep saying he did this terrible terrorist act, but I mean, he didn't kill anybody. So it was a showy act and clearly an economic terrorism in the sense of destroyed property, but it wasn't an attack against people's right to life. In this democracy, anyway. So that's just lying and distorting. So it is nice that they have at least an Ephesus link here, so that's good. Yeah. So, we'll see. Someday maybe we'll get a Wikipedia. There's some guy I think is going to try to get a Wikipedia page on on Ephilism. But whatever. We'll see what happens. So I'll leave that part there, and then we'll see where else to go with this. It doesn't have any. Oh yeah, it gives us a little. Oh, if you're having trouble, call some fat douchebag at some help center who's going to give you all of life's answers. Yeah, it's going to make it all go away. Everything's all right. Yeah, there's no problems. Oh, sorry, it wasn't exactly centered, was it? Details. I often suck at them. So I wish there was a little bit. They should have a follow-up thing where I can. Maybe I'll just ask another question and see what we get for an answer. Anyway, so I shall be back later and such. Alright, back sometime later. Yeah, much later. Anyway, so I was just thinking. I saw the end of an old movie, War of the Worlds, and the old version. And, the idea is that all these movies, you're some point or other facing death, and the annihilation and all of that. And in our real case, it's, the fact is you're going to be killed, and it doesn't really matter whether aliens came and gave you cancer, or a heart attack, or whatever the thing is that's going to finally ruin you. It's the same difference. I mean, they might as well be blowing up the whole world. In the sense, from your perspective, it's going to be the same kind of horrific, terrible, awful event. It's not going to really matter whether you get crushed in an earthquake or you get killed, by some horrible disease. It's in some sense it's going to be worse. It's going to take longer and be more agonizing and painful and frightening and terrifying and horrible. So it's worse than movies in real life, because certainly you don't get to be saved. Okay, you don't get lucky, and there's some great event happens, like all the Martians get killed by some microbe, or whatever it is. Yeah, nothing's going to come to the rescue, and it's really quite bleak. And it's just funny how people just don't care. It doesn't enter their perception as a threat or a big problem. Now, I have to concede, when I was 25, somehow when you have that distance, even though you could get killed by an earthquake, or you could get killed by some weird catastrophe event. It just seems distant enough that it's really easy to just let it slide into your awareness and just slides right out, and that's it. You don't have to think about it. And then when you get this age, you see the inevitability is really hard to ignore. And it's like you just can't miss the brick wall that you're heading for, and it's just always in the background getting, the bricks are getting closer, and you can see the little ants crawling on it and stuff. And it just becomes a lot more real, that you're fucked, and you're going to get foobarred. And, it just doesn't make much sense. You're just saying, what the hell is this about? No. Why is this acceptable? Why is everybody else just saying, okay, yeah, fine, that's the way it works. Circle of life, la 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 la. No, sorry. I mean, it's a real thing to be really bothered by. And it is just kind of funny that it's just ignored as a subject. It's like there was a time bomb and it's ticking, and everybody's just, oh, yeah, who cares? It's not paying any attention. And like I said, I have to admit, I was one of the people that didn't pay much attention. So I guess that's just part of the construction of human psychology, especially when you're still chasing, when you're still chasing and chasing something forward, and you're not running from, the facts of life. That you can be, you can be in such a delusion, a state of neglectful thinking, whatever you want to call it, unrealistic optimism, because there will be a point where you're going to be just as not ready for it. You're going to be just as, I don't feel like it. Even when you're old, you're saying, I don't feel like dying. It's just that's an annoying thing to have to do. Why do I have to? I don't want to do this. Can't we do this some other time? Kind of attitude. And it's hard not to have that kind of attitude. But anyway, I can't do much about that in terms of explaining. Because, I don't know how much I would have been able to appreciate it as an explanation either. So, but I'm just saying in the context, I certainly understood getting gracefully out. I certainly understood it was inevitable that you're going to die, and it's best to die when you can do it gracefully. So that would always be the best choice, is to don't bother getting a disease and get sick. Do it before you get a disease and you get sick, that kind of thing. Being efficient about it, getting out before there's too big a mess made. And, it just seems logical. So anyway, I don't know if that has any relation to the rest of this context of this video. But anyway, we'll try. So I did want to point out, just in terms of the definition of the philosophy, again, that, it's the historical record is clear in terms of why I invented, a club, a name to put in front of the clubhouse of Ephilism, was just because I didn't like the values of antinatalism, didn't think they fit with my own, and in a dramatic way, not in a subtle way at all, in the sense that it was quite obvious to me that all the other feeling animals are in the same precarious condition and position that I am in. They're all, for good reason, looking for the bigger fish that's going to make a meal out of them. And they shouldn't be in that circumstance of being obliged to die in some horrible way for the cause of existence. So, any philosophy that's about getting rid of the smartest thing on the planet and leaving all the less smart things to cannibalize each other is just cruel and stupid. It's like, it's like abandoning your pet with no litter box to be changed and no food to eat and no water to drink or something. It's just cruel. So, yeah, obviously an anti-natalist, okay, who doesn't understand that isn't, might as well be the enemy, because, only, it's exactly the thing you're fighting. You're not, there's nothing else in the war except, everything that qualifies to be called something worthy of protecting. You don't just, you don't fight the Nazis and go into Germany just to save your relatives. That's just bullshit. Anyway, the argument is they're not really saving anything, because obviously without the human beings here, the animals would run amok, and so you'd have even more feeling things, being caught in the natural struggle of, whatever it is, being obliged, to perpetrate the crime of imposing on a future over and over and over again to replicate a stupid molecule. All right, something like that. And there, and so the other thing I just want to make clear, is that it's unfortunate I spent all these years talking about a subject, never talking about any kind of proactive action besides persuasion, coming up with phrases like argue the argument, okay, because it is about an argument, it is about persuasion. These are the important features, and never thinking that there was anything admirable about cheating in an argument, that is, using a bullhorn or taking advantage in some way, saying your speech is more important than somebody else's speech. You're allowed to talk louder. You're allowed to, extort people. You're allowed to block the city streets, or, cause some other crisis or problem or expense or burden to people, in exchange for them listening to you. So I never advocate for anything like that. And unfortunately, there's, like I said, in all causes, you have people who are, they could be classified, I suppose. Some of them are maybe just too stupid to realize, that they really think they're doing something positive, okay, by imposing a negative on society and trying to say they're rescuing or they're on some kind of mercy mission, and and they just can't figure out that that's not how reality works. People don't admire Muslims for their terrorism. It just isn't true. It doesn't win them a whole bunch of points in terms of any kind of respect or any kind of empathy. Because they're quite cruel and brutal and evil in terms of defending their cause, and their cause itself is kind of ugly anyway, but whatever. In terms of, I know better than you, I'm going to tell you what you have to believe. It's so obnoxious. But you can't do much about fanaticism, and especially fanaticism in people who don't really value their future existence and have nothing really to lose, and in some ways maybe can use the cause as an excuse, because they can't just commit suicide. They don't have the courage, but they do have the courage to be a soldier and run into some bullets, and so it kind of forces the issue for them, so they can get over their resistance to dying, by making it a cause. And so it is kind of just cheating, frankly, but it's understandable psychologically, that might work. If you if you're too afraid to jump in the water, and somebody gives you this cause where you can do this good deed by doing it, it'll make it easier for you to do it. And but anyway, it's all pretty terrible and awful, and it's just unfortunate. But it's only the people who can't face the argument honestly that have to use this against the cause and say, okay, this is the reason why the cause is no good, is because, like any other cause, some of the members might go too far. No. Anyway, but certainly there was nothing they learned here about that. So that would be the statement I'd make pretty clear, is that I've always been pretty clear in every conversation, private or public, that I don't advocate, for half actions and pretending it's time to start a civil war. I would argue that eventually these kind of wars are inevitable. I mean, you're having an argument about slavery, and you're basically just saying, okay, we can argue about it for a while, but yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about what I think you're doing is being evil and it has to change. But we can argue about it first, okay? We don't have to jump from my declaration of you as evil to let's kill each other. But there's a point, okay, where yes, if I get the Democratic votes, that you're going to have to, play along, or else, kind of a thing. So there's a time when there's you have to fight for what's right, and maybe it won't be, a majority. Yeah, the majority religion is the Muslim religion. Does that mean that everybody else should just lie down and say they win because they won the democracy? I don't think so. I don't think so. But yeah, these are always the tough questions, in figuring out what the right thing to do is, so in part of that context, I would say, is how reasonable your argument is. So again, there's nothing about defending the prospect that evolution is just a device, okay, which is manipulating matter and obliging it to pretend to be important and significant, and we're productive and we're accomplishing something, when the facts indicate no, we're not really doing that. That our consciousness doesn't fix anything, and the fact is that it breaks an awful lot. And in terms of, it destroys the peace and quiet, and creates a bunch of terror and horror and fear and all of that kind of pain and suffering. So it's not like it's an unreasonable argument. It's not a religious story. It's not some silly fairy tale that compels people. And I guess in some court that has to be acknowledged. It's not a dogmatic fairy tale believed based on faith. It's a reasoned and logical evaluation of existence, most certainly based on personal experience. I've experienced it, and I know I don't want to experience it over and over and over again for millions of more years. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be a horsefly or even a butterfly. I don't want to play live and die, live and die, live and die, live and die, live and die over and over again. And I sort of have a right to say that. And you really don't have a right to say, oh, do it for me. Yeah, no, I don't have to do it for you. Especially if all you have is some fable to tell me about how you need to do it over and over again, when no, you don't. You really don't. When you're dead, you don't need nothing, okay? And there's just no reason that I am obliged to re-wake you up. And certainly not with the condition that you might wake me up instead, so to speak. Alright, so not perfectly stated, but it'll have to do. That's what we'll say. So, yeah. So I guess that we'll call that a video. I will work on some more language, playing with the how to best trigger another human brain to at least acknowledge it's an important subject. It's one you really got to be sure of. If you're going to impose life, you got to be damn sure you're doing something a favor. And so you got to do a checklist and say, did I really consider all these points that need to be considered, and recognize that I'm actually doing something worthy or decent? And I guess that might be a way of approaching it, is some sort of just write up a checklist to say, are you thinking clearly? I mean, are you, really recognizing the essence and truth of the subject, the facts, and realizing that you really don't have any reason to be at all confident that your experiment is going to be in any way definable as successful. Because all it's going to create is something that is going to be horrifically, at the end of the movie, it's going to be horrifically killed. That's not going to be a great ending. It's going to suck, is what it is. It's going to suck. It's not going to be a happy movie. And people aren't going to walk out of the theater, crying with joy. Because guess what? That's not going to be the end. I mean, and you see it. I mean, that's the part that's just so obvious. You see it. All these, every celebrity you ever heard of, you see them turn into nothing. I mean, right before your eyes, be whittled down and destroyed. And it's so damn ugly. And, it's not a good show. The reality isn't a good show. It's not a good, fun movie. Yeah, that's a simple enough statement. It's just not a fun movie. Watching the people you love and care about, annihilated brutally. Yeah, no. Sorry. You don't sell that to the future. Alright, so, that might be enough of a statement there. So, there, I fixed it a little bit. It's a little bit rambly, but yeah, right there at the end I fixed it. Yeah, mostly. Alright, anyway. Till the next time, I try again to communicate with human beings. Oh, so, such a futile pursuit. Communication. Anyway, till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot.